Listen to a conversation between a student and his professor. Excuse me, Professor Allison?
Yes, that's right. How can I help you?
My name's Peter Druitt, and I'm taking Professor Saeed's World History class. He mentioned that you have a class next semester on the same topic, and I wanted to ask you about it.
You're right that I'm teaching a world history class next semester, but I'm not sure it's worth discussing. I don't mean to sound negative, but if you're in Professor Saeed's World History 203 class this semester, you'd have no reason to take my class next semester. The two of us have different teaching styles, of course, but both classes are World History 203, so the content of his class and my class would be the same.
Sorry, I didn't explain very clearly. I wanted to ask about your graduate level class in World History, not World History 203.
Well, that makes more sense in one respect, but I still want to clear one thing up. If you're in World History 203, I'm guessing you're an undergraduate. And as you know, undergraduates are not generally permitted to take grad level classes.
Actually, I just wanted to talk to you about the reading list for your class. You see, Professor Saeed lets us choose our own topic for his end of semester assignment. I came up with an interesting topic and started researching it, but I couldn't find many books or articles with useful information. When I mentioned this to him, Professor Saeed said my topic was something you cover in your class. I was hoping to see your reading list to do more focused research. Would that be possible?
Oh, okay. I understand the situation now. I'd be happy to give you the reading list. There's a couple of things, though. First, I had a problem with my computer yesterday, and apparently it needs a new disk drive. The IT department is handling it, but apparently they've got a backlog of problems to sort out. Can I email you the list when my computer is up and running?
Oh, absolutely. My assignment's not due until the end of the semester, so there's plenty of time. If you're okay, I'll send you an email later and you can just reply and attach the list when you get a chance.
Great. Now, the second issue is that since it's for a grad level class, some of the books on the reading list are reserved for grad students. As I understand it, you can use those books in the library, but not borrow them.
That's fine. My friends like studying in coffee shops or at home, but I generally find those environments distracting, so I'm fine to do the reading in the library.
Well, then that's fine. I'll send you the list as soon as I can, Peter.
Thanks, Professor.
Question 1. Why does the student go to see his professor? Question 2. What is the professor initially confused about? Question 3. Listen again to part of the conversation. What does the professor imply when she says this?
Well, that makes more sense in one respect, but I still want to clear one thing up. If you're in World History 203, I'm guessing you're an undergraduate. And as you know, undergraduates are not generally permitted to take grad level classes.
Question 4. Listen again to part of the conversation. What does the professor imply when she says this?
First, I had a problem with my computer yesterday, and apparently it needs a new disk drive. The IT department is handling it, but apparently they've got a backlog of problems to sort out. Can I email you the list when my computer is up and running?
Question 5. What point does the student make about his study habits? Listen to part of a talk in a literature class. Hello everyone. Today we're going to discuss the sonnet. Originally this was a type of poem exclusively found in Italy. Indeed, the name sonnet comes from an Italian word meaning a song or little poem. The Italian poet Giacomo de Lentini is credited with inventing sonnets in the 13th century, but they were also written by other well-known Italians of the same period, including Dante. Some fine examples were even written by the artist Michelangelo, if you can believe it. After gaining popularity in Italy, sonnets were introduced to England at the beginning of the 16th century. They were not widely popular in that country until acclaimed poets like Philip Sidney, Edmund Spenser, and especially William Shakespeare began to write them. They remained a popular poetic form until the 17th century, went out of fashion for a time, and then became popular again. Traditional sonnets have certain characteristics. They have exactly 14 lines and follow a rhyme scheme. Further, they adhere to a specific structure and are written in iambic pentameter. That's a lot to take in, I know, so let's cover those characteristics in more detail. Before focusing on the rhyme scheme, we first need to know that traditional sonnets come in two kinds. First is the Italian or Petrarchan sonnet, named after the poet Petrarch. The second is the English or Shakespearean sonnet, named for Shakespeare, of course. The forms are named because these poets are the most acclaimed practitioners of that form of sonnet, not because they are its originator. As mentioned, sonnets have 14 lines that rhyme in a specific pattern. In Italian sonnets, the traditional rhyme scheme for the first 8 lines of the poem, known as the octave, is A, B, B, A, then A, B, B, A again. The different letters indicate which lines rhyme with which other lines. In this case, every line A rhymes with every other line A, and every line B rhymes with every other B. The last 6 lines, the sestet, follow a different rhyme scheme. This was originally either C-D-E, C-D-E, or C-D-C, C-D-C. But over time, poets began to change the traditional patterns, and rhyme schemes for the sestet like C-D-C, D-C-D were introduced. English sonnets, in contrast, traditionally follow a different structure and rhyme scheme. They consist of 3 quatrains, groups of 4 lines, with the rhyme scheme A, B, A, B, then C, D, C, D, then E, F, E, F. They finish with a 2-line couplet with a G, G rhyme scheme. The final characteristics of sonnets is that they are written in iambic pentameter. We defined this 1 week ago, but review never hurts, right? The term iambic pentameter describes the rhythm of a line of poetry as indicated by its stressed and unstressed syllable. In technical terms, an iamb is an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. And pentameter means the line has 5 iambs. Penta means 5 in Greek. So when you read a sonnet aloud, the rhythm of each line sounds a bit like the beating of a human heart. Dadum, 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 dadum. Now, in addition to the characteristics that I've already described, sonnets traditionally have a volta, or turn, which signals a change or resolution to a problem introduced earlier in the poem. We'll discuss the volta after looking at some examples of famous sonnets. Question 6. What does the professor mainly discuss? Question 7. What point does the professor make about sonnets? Question 8. What is the professor's attitude when he mentions the artist Michelangelo? Question 9. What does the professor say about Petrarchan and Shakespearean sonnets? Question 10. Which rhyme scheme would you expect the first 8 lines of a Petrarchan sonnet to have? Question 11. Listen again to part of the talk. What does the professor imply when he says this? The final characteristics of sonnets is that they are written in iambic pentameter. We defined this 1 week ago, but review never hurts, right? Listen to part of a lecture in a general science class. Good afternoon, everyone. Our topic today is electrical conductivity. As you'll recall from previous classes, electricity flows through materials in the form of an electric charge or current. The direction of flow depends on whether the particles are positively or negatively charged, and on the material through which the charge is flowing. For charge to flow through a material, that material must possess a property called electrical conductivity. Basically, conductivity can be understood as the ability of a material to allow electrical charge to flow through it. Some materials allow electric charge to flow through them relatively easy in one or more directions. We call these materials conductors. Other materials either do not conduct electricity, that is, they do not allow electric charge to flow through them, or conduct it very poorly. We call these materials insulators. To make these important concepts clear, let's think of a common scenario. Let's say you're using your laptop and you notice that the battery level is getting low. So you take the power cable, plug one end into the wall socket, and the other end into your laptop. Right away, the battery starts recharging. We've all done this hundreds of times, right? But how does it work? Well, inside the power cable is a metal wire. Most metals are very good conductors. They allow electric charge to flow freely. And when you plug the cable into the wall, electricity flows through the wire and into your laptop. But metal is such a good conductor that if you were to touch the wire, the electricity would pass from the wire into your body and give you a shock. So the wire inside the power cable is covered with some kind of plastic or rubber insulator that does not allow electricity to flow. Make sense? Most materials are either conductors or insulators, but there are two special classes of materials that I want to touch on, beginning with superconductors. Most conductors have a certain amount of resistance, that is, they resist the flow of electricity to some extent. This is undesirable because it results in a loss of energy. I'm sure you're familiar with the idea that wires become hot when electricity flows through them. The heat is caused by electrical resistance. Superconductors are materials with zero resistance, so electricity can flow through them without ever losing energy. Superconducting materials have an enormous range of uses and are incredibly efficient. Well, that's in theory. In practice, such materials are not especially useful because most of them only work at very, very cold temperatures. There's one more class of material I'd like to discuss, semiconductors, which are more resistant to the flow of electricity than conductors, but much less resistant than insulators. In other words, electricity can flow through them, but not easily. This may not sound like a useful property, but as you know, semiconductors have had a massive impact on society because they are a key element in every electronic device we own. Why? Well, semiconductors can be manufactured with specific, useful properties. For example, they can allow current to flow more easily in one direction than another, or to flow more easily at certain temperatures, or to flow when there is light or heat, or you get the idea. Again, why are such properties valuable? Well, they mean that semiconductors have valuable uses. These include being used to increase or amplify an electrical signal, or being used to switch a signal in some way, or to convert a signal from one form to another. And these properties of amplification, conversion, and switching are all key processes in modern electronic computing. So, in essence, semiconductors are at the heart of computers. Question 12. How does the professor organize her lecture? Question 13. How does the professor define insulators? Question 14. Why does the professor mention laptop computers? Question 15. The professor discusses several classes of materials. Indicate which information matches each class of material. Question 16. According to the professor, what valuable properties do semiconductors have? Question 17. Listen again to part of the talk. Why does the professor say this? Well, semiconductors can be manufactured with specific, useful properties. For example, They can allow current to flow more easily in one direction than another, or to flow more easily at certain temperatures, or to flow when there is light or heat, or you get the idea. Again, why are such properties valuable? Well, they mean that semiconductors have valuable uses.
Listen to a conversation between a student and her professor.
Hi, Professor. You wanted to see me?
Yes, come in, Anya. It's about the paper you submitted for your assignment. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to do the assignment again.
Really? I'm kind of shocked. I mean, I worked so hard on that paper. Wasn't it good?
I can see how much work you put in, and in many ways, it was a very good assignment, but
I'm confused. If it's good, why do I have to do it again?
I understand that you're upset, Anya, but let me finish, okay? The situation isn't nearly as bad as you think. Now, as I was saying, your assignment was well written and well researched, but it wasn't what I asked you to do. You submitted a review of one of the books from the reading list, but the assignment I set was to write an essay.
Really? I remember the assignment, and I'm sure it said to review a book from the reading list.
It did say that, but here, let me get the actual assignment and read it. Here we go. It says, review one of the 3 books on this week's reading list and then write an essay that compares the arguments in the book with those we discussed in class. Do you see the difference? I wanted you to review the opinions in the book and then write about how they differ from the views we discussed in class. But you just reviewed the book and didn't address the second part of the assignment at all.
So, you were using the phrase review a book in the assignment to mean something like study the book rather than write a review of the book?
Yes, that's exactly right. And as you were the only person who misunderstood the assignment, I don't think that what I wrote was unclear. Do you?
I see. Listen, I'm really sorry about my mistake, Professor. Can I submit a revised assignment next week on Tuesday or Wednesday?
Actually, Anya, it's only Monday, so I'd like it before the weekend, please.
Question 18. What did the professor and student mainly discuss? Question 19. Why is the student confused? Question 20. Listen again to part of the conversation. Why does the student say this?
So, you were using the phrase review a book in the assignment to mean something like study the book rather than write a review of the book?
Question 21. Listen again to part of the conversation. What does the professor imply?
So, you were using the phrase review a book in the assignment to mean something like study the book rather than write a review of the book?
Yes, that's exactly right. And as you were the only person who misunderstood the assignment, I don't think that what I wrote was unclear. Do you?
Question 22.
By when does the professor ask for the student's work to be submitted? Listen to part of a talk in an environmental studies class.
Continuing our discussion of alternative sources of energy, I'd like today to talk about wind power. To generate electricity from wind, turbines are required. These are large machines with blades that turn when the wind pushes against them. This motion is converted into energy in the form of electricity. There are definitely many positives associated with wind power, and in many ways, it's a promising alternative to traditional methods of generating electricity to power our homes and offices. For one thing, wind is a renewable energy source and does not use fossil fuels, as is the case when burning oil or coal to produce electricity. As well, wind does not produce any greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, which have been linked to climate change. Despite these positives, there is an unintended downside to wind turbines. They appear to kill birds. Because the turbine blades are high in the air, where there is more wind to turn them, they can be in the path of flying birds. If the birds don't see the turning blades, they may fly into them and be struck. There is considerable debate about how many birds are killed by turbines in the United States annually, and estimates vary from as low as 10,000 to as high as 500,000. The real figure is undoubtedly somewhere between those two extremes. Whatever the actual figures, it's a problem that people are trying to solve. One potential solution is through better design of the wind turbines. Early turbines had lattice blades that attracted birds and resulted in many deaths. Modern wind turbine design appears to be less dangerous. Today, there is a monopole design with 3 solid spinning blades. While still hazardous for birds that fly into the blades, this design has the advantage of not attracting them. Other designs do away with the rotating blades entirely. The windstalk is one such design that is less dangerous to birds. This device has no blades. Energy is generated by more than 1,000 narrow, 50-meter-tall poles packed tightly together. Within each hollow carbon fiber pole is a stack of small ceramic discs, and between the discs are electrodes. These discs and electrodes are connected to a cable running up the pole. When wind causes the stalks to sway, the discs compress, generating a current. Since the stalks gently sway in the wind rather than rotating very quickly, birds are more likely to see them, and it's considered unlikely that they will collide with them. Planners of wind turbine projects are also working to reduce the risk of bird deaths. When the first wind turbines were built in California more than 20 years ago, they were simply placed in windy locations. Unfortunately, this also turned out to be a migratory bird route. Now, legislation has been put into effect that prevents wind turbines from being constructed on migratory paths. As well, there is a growing trend to build wind farms offshore, in oceans or major lakes. Offshore winds are typically stronger, allowing more electricity to be generated. There are fewer birds near these water-based turbines, and therefore fewer deaths result. Some operators are turning to technology to protect bird populations. At one facility in Texas, radar is used to detect flocks of birds. If a large group of birds approaches the wind farm, the turbines shut down and are only restarted once the birds have passed. The impact of wind turbines on bird populations indicates how complex problems can be. When researchers are looking for sources of energy that will minimize environmental damage, they need to consider the entire ecosystem.
Question 23. What is the talk mainly about? Question 24. According to the professor, how many birds do wind turbines kill each year in the USA? Question 25. What does the professor say about early designs of wind turbines? Question 26. What point does the professor make about the windstock design? Question 27. What are people legally required to take into account when planning a wind turbine project? Question 28. Why does the professor mention a facility in Texas?
Listen to part of a lecture in a history class.
The 19th century was a time of many important events in the history of the United States. One of the most pivotal, which occurred near the start of the century in 1803, was the Louisiana Purchase, the name given to the U.S. government's purchase from France of approximately 830,000 square miles of the Louisiana Territory, named after the French King Louis XIV, the Sun King. This territory stretched from the Mississippi River in the east to the Rocky Mountains in the west, and from Canada in the north to the Gulf of Mexico in the south. It included not only the present-day states of Arkansas, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and Oklahoma, but also parts of the present-day states of Colorado, Louisiana, of course, Minnesota, Montana, New Mexico, North and South Dakota, Texas, and Wyoming. The purchase had important implications for the U.S., not just at the time, but continuing down to the present day. Indeed, it's been described as one of the three most important events upon which the continental power of the modern United States is founded. So why was the Louisiana Purchase so important? Well, for one thing, it gave the United States greater control over its own continent. For most of the second half of the 18th century, American politicians were concerned about which country controlled Louisiana. For much of that period, Louisiana was controlled by France. But after the Spanish defeated the French in the so-called 7 Years' War, from the mid-1750s to 1763, it was controlled by Spain until 1800, when the French again took control. The U.S. government wanted to get ownership of this land, so as not to have a European power controlling territory in continental North America. It also wanted access to the port of New Orleans to facilitate trade. However, it was assumed by most Americans, including Thomas Jefferson, under whose presidency the purchase was actually completed, that it would be necessary to acquire this vast territory little by little. And, in fact, the U.S. government's original plan for the purchase was just to purchase the port of New Orleans and its adjacent lands. When negotiations between the U.S. and France began, however, Jefferson was soon offered the chance to buy the entire Louisiana territory. There was some opposition to the purchase among politicians who claimed that the U.S. Constitution did not grant the right to acquire territory through purchase. Jefferson accepted this viewpoint, but argued that as the purchase was in the form of a treaty, and as the Constitution granted him, as president, power to negotiate treaties, then the purchase was, in fact, constitutional. On this basis, he agreed to pay a sum of over $11 million to cancel French debts worth almost $4 million. This total of $15 million is equivalent to approximately $250 million in today's terms. Another important effect of the Louisiana Purchase is that it virtually doubled the size of the young United States, without the need for wars or conquests. This showed other nations that the United States was willing to use peaceful diplomacy to resolve international disputes. It also contributed to a stronger sense of nationalism than had been apparent before. In simple terms, Americans began to take more pride in their country, to feel that it was strong and globally important. And the land that formed the Louisiana Territory was not just vast. It had ample supplies of valuable natural resources, including gold, silver, and other ores, vast forests that could be cut down for timber, and much of the land was ideally suited for agriculture, with rich soil and a pleasant climate. Taken together, these factors vastly increased the wealth of the United States.
Question 29. What is the professor's main purpose in giving the lecture? Question 30. According to the professor, which modern-day states were wholly within the Louisiana Territory at the time of its purchase? Choose 3 answers. Question 31. When did France take over control of the Louisiana Territory from Spain? Question 32. Listen again to part of the lecture. What does the professor imply?
There was some opposition to the purchase among politicians who claimed that the U.S. Constitution did not grant the right to acquire territory through purchase. Jefferson accepted this viewpoint, but argued that as the purchase was in the form of a treaty, and as the Constitution granted him, as president, power to negotiate treaties, then the purchase was, in fact, constitutional.
Question 33. Listen again to part of the talk.
On this basis, he agreed to pay a sum of over $11 million to cancel French debts worth almost $4 million. This total of $15 million is equivalent to approximately $250 million in today's terms.
Why does the professor say this?
This total of $15 million is equivalent to approximately $250 million in today's terms.
Question 34. What impacts of the Louisiana Purchase does the professor mention?